This is the Prestigious Initiative. Welcome. I'm Chris Bean, and here with me is Chris Kent. Hello, Mr. Kent.
Hello, sir.
Today we're going to be talking about how you personally define success. Success might mean a great number of different things to a number of different people. I think it is a useful thing to go through and create, establish, define your own version of what you think of as success. What would success look like for you personally? And in thinking about this episode, part of this is it's goal setting. You are setting a goal for yourself to be successful. And going through that path of defining and making it specific to you. And you maybe have a goal or a idea or a definition of what success will look like as far as your personal self is worth. You have a definition of what success will look like for your professional self. You have a goal of what success will look like for your family life or whatever other areas that you have. But I think that having or establishing or coming up with or at least having a rough idea of what that success would look like to you, I think is beneficial. And, you've heard, it's been said many different times, you can't hit a target that you can't see or that you're not aiming at. And so part of aiming at or seeing that target, I think, is establishing or coming up with a definition that is specific to you for what success might look like.
I mean, in its simplest form too, like you said, we're talking a little bit again about goal setting because success is accomplishing, an aim or a purpose. You set out to do something and you have accomplished whatever that thing is. And so having that goal to set forth and pursue and then completing that goal, no matter what it may be, can be an aspect of success, and oftentimes success, of course, is talked about with failure because you're going to fail most likely trying to reach your goals or to achieve your goals. But that doesn't mean that you are a failure, but failure is something that happens on the way to success, or some would argue that failure must happen in order for there to be success. So, the two things do go hand in hand, but we're talking specifically today about defining success and what success will look like for you. And, again, it does tie back into that goal setting and the values and things that are important for you. And I think that the trickiest thing for us to, just as humans in general, is to remember that success does look different for everybody. I think we have a kind of widely accepted idea of what someone who is successful looks like or what their life looks like. And it's kind of accepted that, you have lots of money, maybe you have free time, you have lots of family and friends and whatever it may be that is success. But just because that is a widely accepted parameter of success doesn't mean that success means that to every single person. So it is a very individual type thing, what success may end up being like. But I do think in general there is kind of an idea and, things change and it's different for everybody. But defining it for yourself I think is the first step to becoming successful. That way you can start pursuing those goals and achieving those things. And, one success will probably lead to other successes with, again, the room for failure along the way too. So again, it starts with defining what it looks like for you. And maybe that's just taking a reevaluation or looking again at your goals and things like that.
So I guess as we're talking about this, I can see two kind of different paths. Maybe there's some other ones, but two essential different paths to go down. You can go down the path of thinking, okay, let's start small. Okay, what's a small success that I can have today or this week or this month? Okay, then that'll build up to this other success and so on. So you can start from the small and work big, or you can start from the big and work backwards. For whatever reason, I think of this in terms of starting from the end and working backwards, starting from the big and then working backwards. What would you say, Mr. Kent? How would you interact with that?
Well, it's simply, how do you eat an elephant?
One small bite at a time.
One small bite at a time. I think you start with the the small successes and the small parts that might lead to that big part. But even in that, analogy or that saying, the end goal is to eat the whole elephant. So it's not like you're starting without an aim or a purpose. You have a goal in mind, but you take small steps to get to that goal. And, not saying I tackle all projects or things in life like that, but I think it's a good place to start, especially if you don't know where to start. Just start with something small. I take one step toward wherever this thing is, and you can continue building up from there. But again, I don't want to sound like I can't give you an answer because I say it's one thing or the other, but it is so dynamic. However, yeah, I would start small.
So I guess my question to you would be is if you start small and you're taking those small steps towards, well, what are you taking the small steps towards? If you start small, you have to have some sort of idea of what, the next step is or what the overarching kind of idea is.
Yeah, well, that's what I was just saying, though, is your goal is to eat that whole elephant. Well, you don't just shovel in as much as you can. You start with small bites, and then eventually, once you know that you can handle smaller bites, and you take on larger bites, and then larger bites and larger bites, or maybe you divide sections up and you work on a whole section, things like that. So I think some of the times too, it's being able to learn your capacity to do something, or being able to prove to yourself that you can do something, if that makes sense. If my goal is to save $50,000 by the end of the year, I almost feel like I need to prove to myself that I can save $5 first. And then, okay, I know I can save $5. I can save $10. All right, now I can save $50. Then I can save $100. And it kind of grows exponentially. So I guess it sounds kind of silly to say that I have to prove to myself that I can do some things. But in some ways, it is like that. I need to know that I can do the small things first. And those small things can grow and grow and grow. And then until eventually I achieve that goal or make it to that successful point. And even within that, I would say all along the way, anytime I do something that helps me to achieve that goal, that is success. I saved $5, that's a success. I saved $10, that's a success. Save $50, that's a success to eventually get me to that end goal. Now, of course, my end goal is $50,000. I'll be successful when I get $50,000, but doesn't mean I'm not successful in reaching or working toward that thing, if that makes sense too. So on top of everything that's already dynamic and fluid, the success itself is too. I'm not a failure until I get $50,000. I'm taking the steps and doing the things that get me to that point, which do make me successful as well. So I think that's part of it too, is I need to prove to myself that I can do it, and then kind of build up toward the harder or the larger type of things that are happening.
I like that idea because, if I hadn't thought about it like that. So for me, if I'm thinking about it from the end first, I could see a great potential of if I haven't made it to that end, then I'm a failure. Because if success is past this mark and I make it 3 feet in front of that mark, well, I didn't finish the race. I didn't make it. I didn't make it to successful. But from your starting small and working to big kind of idea or mindset or layout, you are achieving small successes that are leading you to that last end big success.
Yeah, but you're absolutely right too. I mean, if the goal is such and such a thing and you fall short of it by 4 steps or whatever it is, then you didn't reach that goal. But I think that also introduces the next level or another level to it, which is your timetable or your restraints or your confines or whatever that success is. Because in the example I just gave, which I didn't do it on purpose, it just kind of worked out this way, but I didn't have an end goal or I didn't have a timetable. It wasn't, get $50,000 in 7 months, which it would be difficult for me in my current position. However, that has a timetable on it. And so if my goal was to get that money within that time and I didn't make it, then I wasn't successful in making that. I did save along the way, but I didn't achieve that goal. So I think it also depends on what your goal is too. If your goal has a timetable on it, maybe that makes it a little more difficult. But if your goal just is to save more and it's open-ended, you can be successful in those things too. And again, like you said, you still made it that far in the race or whatever it is. You didn't meet the qualifications and you weren't quote unquote successful, but maybe to you, you've never made it that far before. I would consider that some sort of success because you did better than you did before, but it wasn't meeting the goal. So again, it's tough to say. I think that's why we need to sit down and talk about it, because defining success can be difficult.
So I think one concept that I think perhaps we need to kind of establish is, in order to define success on your path to success, you should use those small scale successes as motivation to help you and continue you on that path, the momentum moving forward. But another concept is we have to have a heading. And so perhaps maybe it's a rough idea. Maybe it's a very detailed, specific, ornate, well thought out idea. Regardless, I think we have to have a heading. And so we have a end idea, a concept. Again, maybe it's really vague. Maybe it's just, you have an idea or a rough outline of what you want success to look like for you in the end. Or maybe it's super detailed and specific, and however you want to lay it out. But I think in order to use those small scale successes as motivation, as momentum to propel you and heading you in that right direction, you have to have a direction to go. And so perhaps we start with the end, and then, okay, that's where I want to end up. And then, like we did with goals, you have some smaller goals that lead to that end goal. Then you have some smaller projects that lead to that end goal. And then you have some smaller tasks that end to those. And you utilize those small daily tasks, routines, habits that you go through on a daily basis to help you have motivation, to help you have the drive to propel you forward. And then you achieve those. Yes, that's a small win. Great. And then we can continue on. Awesome. Another small win. All with the idea or the mindset of these things are in line. These things are getting you to where you want to be at, which is that achievement of success, whatever it means to you at the end.
Yeah, I think I mentioned earlier that you use those small successes to motivate you to get to your larger success, but it can go the other way too. You can use that large success to help propel the smaller successes. And guess what I mean is, you're going through whatever it is you're going through, and you might feel like you are not making progress, or you might feel like the small victories aren't amounting to anything. You think about what your end goal is, or what your larger scale success is, and let that motivate you to keep working toward that thing. So rather than being motivated by the small successes, you're motivated to work harder because you're working toward the larger success. Does that make sense? To flip that kind of the other way.
So so basically what you're saying is you use those small things in order to, let's see, how can I word this? You use those small things as kind of like, okay, great, now I can check that off because I know I'm going to get that end thing. That's what I want. And you use those small things as kind of pass-throughs almost.
No.
No?
No. I think what I'm saying is, sometimes you're like, hey, I just have to get through whatever it is today. I did this part of it. Okay, done. I just have to do this thing. Okay, done. I guess it does sound like I'm just checking it off, but I know sometimes it's enough to celebrate that small victory or that small success. Other times it's important to remember what you're working toward. So I think sometimes, I am motivated because, okay, I did this today. Great. I achieved this small success. Other times I said, okay, why am I doing this? I'm doing this to eventually reach this bigger success. So I'm going to keep doing these small things so I can make it to this point. And so sometimes I think the success is in doing the small thing. And sometimes I think I'm motivated to do the small thing by the bigger success.
So the big success despite those small things as wins or small wins, you're motivated to continue on doing those small things, whatever they may be, because you know that that big success is coming.
Yeah,
and you're willing to do the work for those small things in order to achieve that big thing.
Yeah, sure. I think that's a good way to put it. I don't know if I'll ever be able to explain it well enough, but sometimes the small success is enough, and sometimes I just do the small thing to win eventually the large thing. A short game versus long game.
Sure.
I don't know. Maybe that's just me, and maybe that's not the best way to approach it, but sometimes doing a little bit is enough, and sometimes it's not enough, and so I have to look toward the larger success in the end.
Sure. Yeah, I think keeping that larger success in your mind is incredibly beneficial, because otherwise you might, and so I think maybe we've talked about this before, maybe not, but having let's see, how does the phrase go? You can do any what as long as you know the why, or as long as you have a strong enough why, you can do any how. It's something like that. I'm really butchering that phrase. I'm sorry. If you know what it is, feel free to message us and say, hey, you got it wrong, but this is what it is. But essentially what it is if you know why you're doing it, you can shoulder whatever the work is, because you know why you're doing it. I get up at this time in the morning, which is terrible. I hate doing it, but I do it because of this. This is the why I do it. And because I know that why is big enough, I'm willing to bear the weight of this how. And so I think that phrase, however poorly I reestablished it here, is kind of the essence of what you're saying is, because you know the why, what the success is. That's why you're doing those things. So how the daily thing that you're going through every day, it's fine. I'll put up with it, whatever, because you know at the end that's the thing that you're working towards. That's your why. That's your drive to do the daily things.
Sure.
Have you heard of that? I probably not, because I did such a poor job of representing it.
No, but I like the idea.
Yeah. Sure. Yes. Yeah. And I wish I could say it better or establish who it was from. But anyways, I think that having that idea or mindset or concept of your end success is beneficial. And so I guess we kind of went back and forth a little bit, starting small and then having the end. And I think that for me anyways, and maybe I'm putting words in your mouth, but for you have to have some sort of at least rough idea of what the end success looks like. And then you can kind of break that down. If you want to have just the end, okay, great. Think about that. And then, okay, great. Now, what are the daily things? What are the small things? What are perhaps the monthly things or the weekly things that I can do that will get me to that thing at the very end? Right? Is that kind of the essence of what we've talked about so far?
Yeah. I think it goes back to our goals and values too. Basically the same exact thing.
Sure.
You like to start at the end, and
I do.
And then work down to the very minute of every day of what you need to do to get to that end.
Yes, sometimes.
Yeah, and I as far as success goes and achieving things too, I think it's very normalized, or just the thought of how quickly can I get X, Y, or Z thing? How quickly can I get to this point in time? Tim Ferriss, 4-hour work week. How little do I have to do to get me where I want to be, or 30 under 30 or whatever. I don't have phrases, things. But I guess my idea is, go ahead.
So I would argue that having a 30 under 30 or something similar to that kind of goal or idea or mindset. I keep saying mindset. Is that right? I keep saying concept and mindset. No, that's right. Okay. Sorry. Having that, I think you need to have a why to that. I want to be 30 under 30. Okay, but why? Why is that important to you? What does that do for you? Does that actually what you want, or is that what you think that you should want?
Which ties back into your values.
Yes, right. And I would say, as you're going through this process of establishing what success looks like to you, hold true to your values. And if being 30 under 30 and being recognized for that is something that, for whatever reason, I'm older than 30, so maybe I'm jaded because I didn't make it there, my 30 under 30s. But who cares? Who cares if I'm 30 under 30? What does that do for me?
Right, and I was kind of coming at it from the angle of, like I said, time wise and how quickly you want to do things. And I think we're so obsessed with how quick can I get this thing, or how quick can I make this much money, or how quick can I become X, Y, or Z thing. And I some things are going to take time, and I've trying to learn, and it's a constant process, but like trying to learn to let things happen slowly, because I'm guilty of it too. I'd start a new project and say, okay, I want this to be done in a month, or let's start this new business. I want it to be done within a year, or let's save this much money. I want to do it in this much. Like, I'm guilty of it too, but some things are just going to take time. And I think that's, for me, where those small successes come in too, because I can't exactly achieve that thing as quickly as I want to. So instead of being distraught or upset about the fact that I'm not at a certain point yet, I like to celebrate and find motivation in the fact that, okay, I completed this step toward whatever that success is, or I'm this much farther toward the success, or I did this thing that I needed to do to get to that success too. And I think, again, part of that is letting it happen slowly. And so I'm not so obsessed with the end and the success, the big success, the end goal of whatever the thing is. Instead, I'm rather just taking the process as it goes and letting it take the time it needs to kind of flourish without killing myself in the process, or putting myself in a bad position, because it's something that's just going to happen slowly. And so, like I said, rather than be frustrated about it, just letting it happen slowly in the small steps, and then eventually it'll all come together too. And there's nothing wrong with wanting to be 30 under 30, or wanting to be having those goals and wanting to be those things and being successful in that way. I just think that, sometimes we get caught up in the idea, like you said, do you actually want that, or do you just like the idea of what it is, and you'll do whatever it takes to get to that point? I don't know. Again, it's values and goals and what's important to you. If what's important to you is being rich and having no friends and not doing things, and go for it. But I'm also not saying you can't be rich and have friends too. It all depends on what you want and the steps you take to get there, and finding out what is success for you and what you're willing to give up, or what you're not willing to give up on the way to becoming that success, or successful in your opinion.
So a note, maybe a small tangent on what you're talking about, is going the slow. You didn't necessarily say go the slow route, but taking it slow, take your time with things.
No.
Well,
okay. Yeah.
I think this is in line with what you're saying, and you have talked about this in a different kind of idea or mindset before, but the same kind of concept is, we have seen people come into our lives that do things really, really well with almost no practice or effort. They just are naturals, and that's great, and they can ride that natural talent for X time. The unfortunate part for those people is, after that natural talent runs out, which almost universally it does run out, which means then they have to actually put the work in to do the things on a daily basis in order to continue or even sustain what they have achieved based solely on natural talent. They can't. And maybe I shouldn't say they can't. They often don't. Because what happens is, they have natural talent, so they don't actually have to work or do anything. They just get things handed to them. Oh, great, awesome, good, and things happen fast, and wow, this, things are just happening. Wow, they're not actually doing anything. They're just, somehow whatever they have, people have an interest in, and so everything seems to be happening for them all at once, and then almost all at once, all of that goes away, and because they don't have the routines, the habits, the structure in place to be able to sustain those things, to be able to put the work in. Not to say that they're not willing, or not to say that it doesn't happen from time to time, that natural talent person actually, does put the work in and continues on. But from our experience, and I've seen this, Natural talent gets you so far, but after that natural talent runs out, which it will run out, you have to have the work ethic, for lack of a better phrase, to continue. Otherwise, you can't rely on natural talent forever because it goes away. It runs out. If you don't have the structure, the habits, the skills to be able to back those things up, it doesn't matter how fast you got to the top, you're going to fall just as fast. And so perhaps a cap in the feather of maybe going, not worrying about the speed at which you achieve something means that you are establishing that structure. You're putting the work in, the time in to develop those skills and habits and practices so that you can continue on when/if that natural talent runs out for you.
Yeah, I don't think that's exactly what I was trying to say, but I like what you said, and it does make me rethink what I was trying to say. Is maybe that is what I was trying to say.
That's how I understood it, anyways.
Yeah. I mean, at a certain point, you're chasing something because it just comes naturally, and the success comes to you no matter what. And then the minute you stop becoming successful, you give up because, well, you weren't successful anymore because you have to put any work in, and you didn't. And yes, I would agree with that too. But and again, maybe that's what I was trying to say. I think just in general too, not abandoning something or being afraid of something because it is going to take long, or letting yourself go through the process of whatever that may be, I think is something that we try to shy away from because we want things now. We want the success now. We want to be good now. When, part of the process is just the process itself. Maybe is more what I was trying to say, but I agree. Yeah, I've definitely seen that just as you have. Someone is naturally talented or they have the success right out of the gate, but then that success or that natural talent will run out and then they'll give up because they don't want to put the work in. They don't want to do the extra things. They want whatever it is easy and quick. And so they stop or they quit or they, label themselves a failure because it didn't come to them without effort. And so I think that's a good thing to note too, is sometimes being successful will require you to be hardworking and determined. And like we talked about right at the very beginning, it's going to come with failure. It's not always going to be easy. You're not always going to be successful. Those two things go hand in hand. And so, if you're pursuing something and maybe even before you start pursuing it, you decide not to because it might take some extra work, or that you don't have the equipment or the ability or the skill to do whatever it is. So you just don't pursue it in the first place when really all you need to do is put a little bit of effort in, and then, you'll set yourself up a lot better by doing a little bit of work. Sometimes that's necessary. And then during that process, understanding that it doesn't happen overnight, a good example is a bodybuilder. They go to the gym once, they don't become ripped and Mr. Universe or
sometimes it feels like some people can have that.
Sure, but it's a process. You don't go once and then you become Superman. You have to keep going and showing up and the hard work and dedication of that. And I find it hard to believe anyone who's gone through that process and really reshaped their body or their life, specifically in the gym, had a day where they went to the gym and they woke up and they said, man, nothing changed. I'm just going to quit. I'm sure they all had those days, but then they stuck to it and they persevered through it and they were successful in their goal, because whether they celebrated the small victory of making it to the gym that day and completing one workout, or they went to the gym and completed multiple workouts because they were working toward that one goal and they were motivated by that end goal. Whatever it is, they ended up being successful because they had to put the work in, And like you said, sometimes it seems people go to the gym one time and boom, they're done. And they're successful and they're ripped and they're Mr. Olympia or whatever.
That's natural talent.
Right. And then when that stops, or when they can't do that anymore, when that doesn't work anymore, they give up because they don't want to put the work in. They don't want to do what it takes to be successful. So sometimes, it is that long game and you have to be comfortable or at least accepting of the fact that it's going to take a while. And that's when I said, like I said, also toward the beginning, that's when I start to find solace and am grateful for the small success, eventually leading up to that big success, because that big success is farther away and it's going to take me a long time to get there. And so for me personally, it's hard to be like, oh, in 532 more workouts, I'll be there. As opposed to, all right, today I did the workout. Great. Tomorrow, I'll go do the workout. Great. The day after that, I'll go do the workout. Great. And it's easier for me to take that small scale success over that, in 500, however many workouts, I'll be there. This is worth it to me. When you put it that way to me, it's like, oh, it's not worth it. Heck, that's going to take me 7 years, which it might take me 7 years, but that's what, that's how it pans out. So I guess that's kind of what I mean too, is, letting things happen slowly and finding, being grateful for the small successes that will eventually lead to that big success. Again, we talked about it earlier too, and kind of tying it all back in and just letting it happen slowly sometimes, realizing that I'm not going to snap my fingers or wake up the next day and all of a sudden I am successful. But it's going to take a little bit probably. And now even talking about that too, did you have anything you wanted to add to that?
No, go ahead.
I was just going to say, sometimes I think often when we're working toward being successful, because some things happen a little bit slower than others, sometimes it's also hard to realize or recognize when we are finally successful. I have this goal of whatever I want. We make it to that goal after however long it is. We get there and we think, oh, I made it to this goal. Well, we want more, or we don't feel like we are successful in reaching that goal, even though we are there at the thing that we wanted. We're going to want more, or we're not going to be able to feel like we are successful too. So again, taking time to celebrate the successes is important too. I'm not saying overindulge yourself and act like you're the most important person on earth and the best person ever. But, when you reach that goal, or you are successful in whatever you worked toward, let yourself acknowledge it and let yourself kind of feel that success. And then, as in true good fashion of setting goals and being successful, make a new goal and start working toward that goal. But, I think it's difficult too, because once we start on that path of success, we're going to want more and more and more and more and more. And so sometimes I think our goals or our victories can get lost in that feeling of not good enough, or that feeling of wanting more, if that makes sense.
And I think kind of going right off of what you just said was a good exercise to go through is to create a list of successes that you've achieved at this point, wherever you are in life. I did this earlier this week. In fact, I sat down and I don't think it's done. I'm sure I can add more things, and doing that is, at least for me, it's difficult to think about some of the things that I have done in the past and see them as successful or successes, because then that starts to flip my mind a little bit to think of myself as being successful, which, if you have a list of successes, things that you have already done that are successful, perhaps you are successful. And I would challenge anybody to sit down and do that and not feel good about themselves at the end of it. Maybe you only have 2 things. Okay, fine. But those 2 things were successful. And I would have to imagine anybody would have more than 2 things that they've done in their life that are successful. However, sit down, create a list of successes that you personally have already made at this point, and just see what that does for you. And maybe this is a week-long endeavor. Maybe it's a month-long endeavor. Oh yeah, I got this one thing. Oh yeah, I got this. And it changes the way you think about yourself into whatever you were thinking about before. It flips the script, so to say, for you to see yourself as somebody who is successful, which is a huge thing. Huge thing. So if you haven't done something like that, if you haven't thought about that before, I would challenge you to sit down and create a list of successes that you've achieved for yourself. And then not only does that make you feel good now, but if you have a day, a week, a time later on that you start to feel down, drained, frustrated, worried, whatever it is, pick that up, look at those, flip through those. think about those successes and then use that to help to motivate yourself or to drag yourself out of whatever dump or slump that you're in to continue pressing and moving forward.
Yeah, and even in that case too, just having that list to go back and refer and reaffirm yourself of the successes you've already achieved. And I think oftentimes it's easy to feel like we don't deserve the success we already have, or we haven't earned the success we already have. But oftentimes you put in the work to make it there. I would encourage you, just as Mr. Bean did, to have those lists and look at those things and remind yourself, I was successful in this thing. I did do this thing. I did earn this thing, whatever it is, either to motivate yourself to become more successful or just to reassure yourself that you are successful already in the goals that you set out for yourself or the things that you have accomplished. Because, like I said, sometimes it's hard to recognize that success when you are in it because you feel like you've been chasing it for so long. But just take a moment or take a little bit of time and pause and make a list and think to yourself, hey, I have already achieved this many things, or I have X, Y, or Z thing, or I am successful in these ways already. Either again, to motivate yourself or just to reassure yourself that you are successful in many different ways. I think can be important not only for yourself, self-esteem, or just yourself in general, but if you're trying to pursue further success, remind yourself where you already are before you continue on to bigger and better success.
Yeah, I've heard about that, making a success list for a length of time, and it seemed kind of funny to me to sit down and do that. And it was a really weird kind of process to think about those things that I've done as successes. And so if you're on the fence, if you've heard about this before and you're like, I don't know, just do it. Take 10 minutes. Take 10 minutes and just write down one or two things, and see that you don't add more. See that you don't improve the way that you feel or think about yourself. If you've heard about it before, even if you haven't, if this is the first time, I would challenge you, take 10 minutes, sit down and try it. See what it does for you. If it doesn't do anything, okay, fine. But if it does, think about the benefit, the other successful things that you can add to that list later on.
Yes, sir. Yeah. Do you have any key takeaways from our conversation today? I feel like it was a little all over the place.
It was. I think that part of that is success means so many different things to different people. And if there was a key takeaway to have, I would say to establish what success looks like for you. And then use your daily, weekly, monthly, however you want to interact with it, self to propel you, to motivate you, to put you on the path to achieve that thing. And perhaps you have an idea for success at work and an idea for success at home or whatever it is, but utilize those along with your core values to align yourself to achieve those things. And I don't know that we necessarily said it, but if you end up 5 steps away from your end goal, 5 steps away from that big success, understand that those other things that you've done that led you to there, don't count that as a failure. Don't count it as a failure. You've already made it this far. See that as a win. Okay, yes, you didn't. You're $5 shy from your what'd you say, $50,000? Oh man, I'm $5 shy. Okay, but look at what you've done, right? Don't see it as oh man, oh poor me, I didn't make it, or all the negativity. Use that as motivation. Use those small successes to propel you, to motivate you to continue to achieve whatever it is. So just in case you end, 3 feet from the goal, see what you can do to dust yourself off and drag yourself those other feet. Or if you can't do it, okay, fine. Understand that all of those things that led you to that point right there, maybe redefine your definition of success. Maybe you've made it. If you're 3 feet away from what you counted for success, understand that you're probably harder on yourself than what other people could or would be. So maybe you've made it. That's my takeaway. How about you, sir?
Don't be don't be afraid to put the work in. Don't be afraid of the work. Don't be afraid of the failure. And don't be afraid to let things happen slowly. Again, like you said, maybe you are a success and you just haven't taken the time to think about it or internalize it. But, it is a process and it will take work and you are going to fail. Sorry to burst your bubble. At a certain point in time, you'll come across a failure. Doesn't mean you are a failure, but it's part of the process in becoming successful. So put the work in, trust the process of whatever it is you're doing, and then, make sure that you reaffirm to yourself the successes you've already achieved and use that to help motivate you to further success. I think is for me a pretty big part of being successful in the moment, and then also what success will look like eventually in the long term as well.
Very good. So as always, we're talking about the book that I'm reading right now. I am continuing to read and to study Jordan Peterson's Maps of Meaning. I think we talked about last time that I made it to the actual introduction of the book, made it past all the preliminary information to know and understand and to comprehend. And on page 91, I found the actual introduction of the book. And now I am past that and actually in the point where he's talking about the myths and he's setting those up. And we haven't got through one full myth yet, but he's starting to talk about the myths and how all of them have kind of some, doesn't matter what myth or what century it's from or whatever, they all have pretty similar kind of characters in those stories. And those characters are there for specific things, to set things up or to act like the chaos, or to act as the order, or those different kind of ideas or mindsets about those things. And so now I'm actually into the meat and potatoes of the book, and so I'm excited to continue on and to learn to learn the ideas and mindsets behind the myths that are there. But also I'm actually kind of interested into hearing the myths themselves, and not necessarily, yes, how they tie into, what I'm doing now, but just the myths themselves, I think are interesting. And so I'm looking forward to those things. Thanks for joining us. Until next time, take initiative.